goes back to the net. Picked off there at Bob Murdoch. Then Turnbull tried to keep it in. Bollerev gets it out. Sittler gave him a shot. And Darryl Sittler sends Tiger Williams. Over the line, Bollerev a shot. That's knocked down. Bollerev another shot. And Palmatier stops that, and the puck is carried down the ice. Lanny McDonald action. No ice. Lanny McDonald gets it back to Sittler. Sittler trying to keep it in there. And it's chopped back. Hutchison down past where Jean Pronovo. And Willi Plett. Out of Atlanta. Knocked off the puck. Williams just gets rid of it to center ice. Jan. Over on the wing to Ed Kia. His shot knocked down by Hutchison. Out to Darryl Sittler. Lanny McDonald was trying to get away. And they're starting to put it. They're hitting each other.
They're into it now. Sittler, Hutchison. Oh, the glove went flying in the air, and they're all into it. Oh, the electricity is really something in here now. There's with his jersey off. Around the perimeter, taking a look at things as punches are flying in all directions here at the Omni in Atlanta. Sittler lands a good right. Gloves and sticks all over the ice. Everybody standing here at the Omni. Shand. And Tiger Williams now in front of the Leaf bench.
Well, they're throwing now.
Throwing.
Good left. Well, anytime you get a lot of body checks being thrown out there, Brian, sooner or later, you're going to have a fight or two, and that's exactly what happened. The Atlanta Flames have that extra man on the ice, but they do.
This crowd has been in an uproar since Pronovo got the first Atlanta goal to make it a 2-1 game. Now Hutchison wants to get in. Little Bobby Lalonde gets in there. Number 6 of the Flames. Houston is involved. Hutchison still throwing punches. They can't bring him down. There are 2 or 3 of them. Palmatier is furious, banging his stick on the ice. Now the Leafs come off. Turnbull comes out to help, and he starts punching. We could have something get out of hand here.
The Atlanta Flames had the extra man on the ice. I don't know where he came from, but Turnbull jumped on the ice.
You weren't the only one to spot that. Palmatier was really getting frustrated. You could sense that he wanted to get involved. He was banging his goal stick on the ice. He noticed the discrepancy in numbers. And Turnbull finally came off the bench and got into it. Turnbull has his opponent pinned now right on the blue line as Shand and Williams are still ready for another round. Randy Mitten. Now this is some game for his first playoff game. Randy Mitten from Calgary.
You know, Houston and Rota were both taking shots at Hutchison, and then that's when Turnbull jumped on the ice. Well, we might have a few ejections after this, Brian.
A lot of underwear showing out there on the Flames part. Got Williams divorced from Shand. Now Houston has challenged Williams, and here comes Plett. He'd like a piece of Williams. So the Leafs move in, and they square off once again. You'd think they'd be too tired to carry on anymore. The captain says, I'm going to get a drink here.
just wondering, Gary, with 51 seconds remaining, whether the referee might play in the next period.
Oh, Burrows is into it now. Look at those punches.
You know, you have no idea how that takes the strength out of you for the remainder of the game. You know, you're just whipped, so you can appreciate how well conditioned those boxers are.
Well, that was Shand and Burrows. Shand had quite a wrestling match and a punch-up with Williams, and he must have a lot of energy because he decided to throw some punches then with Burrows. Just 51 seconds, as you mentioned, Gary, to play in this second period. They are tired. Now it's up to Bruce Hood to sort out the penalty minutes and we'll find out what happened to Turnbull.
You know, it might be a good idea right now just to send both teams to the dressing room and add on the 51 seconds to the next period. You know,
well, I agree with that. That might be a good idea. Gary, I often wonder why they don't hurt themselves more in these fights. There aren't more broken bones in the hand. Look at Tiger.
Here we go.
Cliff Fletcher told me before the game, if the Leafs want to get physical, we'll stand right up to them. He said, I'm not concerned about us being intimidated.
Well, I think, you know, intimidation has played such a big part in professional hockey. But I think once you get into the National Hockey League, it's very difficult to intimidate the majority of the players, you know, or you wouldn't be in here. It's a tough league, so you're not going to run anybody out of the ice, out of the building. I think some players are just a little more aggressive than others. Well, they locked Tiger outside the ice surface.
Not for long. There's the time remaining, 51 seconds, and as Gary has mentioned, there's a possibility we may play it in the next period, and that's exactly what's going to happen. The teams are going to leave the ice.
Now, by the time they get everything sorted out, and you know, it could erupt again, so send the teams to the dressing room, get everybody a chance to gain their composure and think what they have to do in that next period.
Now the Leafs are leaving. Doenhoefer still talking with the referee, Bruce Hood, in the center ice area, along with McKechnie of the Leafs, who's had a big second period. The clock, Bill, has it been running, or what happened there? 40 seconds now to play. How did that happen?
Well, one time it was stopped, now it's running again. Well, they're winding it down. That's what they're doing to set it for the intermission.
The officials are certainly going to have fun sorting all this out, and there certainly will be a few ejections.
There's Fred Creighton.
And so the score, with 51 seconds remaining in the second period, it's Toronto Maple Leafs 2 and Atlanta 1.
Harry Sinden, the general manager of the Boston Bruins, is here to scout these two teams, and it's quite possible that his Bruins will be playing either the Leafs or the Atlanta Flames. First of all, I must ask for your reaction to what we've just seen.
Well, it was unfortunate that it went on so long, Dave.
I think it was unfortunate it started at all, Harry.
Yeah, someone came out the bench, I guess. It appeared the Atlanta bench there. They ended up with 6 people out there. It'd be interesting to see how he sorts these penalties out, but it's just too bad that it was a pretty good hockey game, particularly that second period, and it was too bad to see it develop into something like that. However, they happen from time to time.
Yes, they do, Harry, and I can remember when you were working with Hockey Night in Canada as an analyst before Team Canada 72, before your return to the Bruins. You sat down and told me once that you thought hockey could take fighting out of the game and how it would improve the game so much more if that could be done and were to be done. Do you still feel now that you're in the game that can be done?
Oh, yeah. I don't think the game itself would suffer if it came out. I don't think we see nearly as much of it now as we did in 20 years ago or 25 years ago. And incident like this is few and far between. But I don't think the game itself would suffer. You've seen the international series with the best players from the NHL and international teams, and they don't suffer when it's not in there.
Talk about your team.
Here at the Omni in Atlanta, Toronto leading Atlanta 2-1. The period is not over yet. 51 seconds to play in the second period, but the teams have gone to the dressing rooms because there was quite a punch-up with a lot of players out there. And Gary, this, of course, takes us back to the Philadelphia Flyers and their approach to hockey not so very many long years ago. The Broad Street bully approach, intimidation, all that. And there seems to be a growing trend against that form of hockey. Have you changed your thoughts on it since you played with Fred Shearo's clubs?
Oh boy, you're really putting me on the spot, aren't you? Well, first of all, Brian, there's a lot of ways intimidating a team. You know, Montreal does it with their speed. I think it really depends on the type of players that you have on your team. If you have a lot of big players and you're not that good a skating club, then you have to use a lot of body work and work in the corners. But let's remember one thing, that it takes two people to fight. You know, I've never seen one person fight by himself. So unfortunately, I don't like to see the big brawls out there. I don't think there's any reason for it. If two guys want to go, let them fight, get everybody else out of there, and if somebody's in an awkward position, the officials break it up.
And we still can't tell anybody what the penalty calls have been because they haven't announced them yet. And that'll come up when we come back with the start of what will become the third period.
Right, Brian. One thing, I know Atlanta, they had the extra man out there. I don't know where he came from. That was during the altercation. And then when Hutchison was in an awkward position, he was taken apart by two Atlanta Flames. Turnbull came on the ice. So, you know, he'll probably get a game misconduct and at least probably will play a man short.
All right, aside from all the fighting that took place, there were three...
At the microphone. Go ahead, boys.
Thank you, David. We have Gary back here, and we were talking earlier about the Philadelphia Flyers and some of their tactics of intimidation a few years back, and leaving the players' bench, Gary. This has come up from time to time, and I know the league has tried to curb that sort of thing with heavy penalties, heavy fines. Who is responsible for such a thing? Is it just an impromptu act by the player himself in some cases? I'm sure it must be. Or is it a sort of an instruction from the coach or a feeling on the team, we've all got to stick together, guys?
Well, you certainly have to stick together. There's no question about that. The reason that Turnbull jumped on the ice, and I'm sure that I would have done the same thing, anybody else would have done it. Two Atlanta players were beating up on Hutchison, and all he wanted to do is just take one man away from Hutchison, and that was it. Unfortunately, the rule that they have in the National Hockey League, that first man off the bench is automatically out of the game. So in all probability, Turnbull will be out.
And in some cases, there are suspensions for the following game and heavy fines as well. With the Flyers, did Shiro have a set plan in mind? Did he say, Kelly or Schultz or somebody, when something like that happens, you guys go first? We don't want Clark or Leach or McLeish going over.
Brian, I don't believe this. Anyway, you don't want the same guy to do it more than once, let's put it that way. You know, if trouble started out there and one of your men was in an awkward position, it's a team situation that right away you come to his aid. You know, you don't want to certainly gang up on him, but protect your own player. And again, you don't want the one guy jumping off the bench this game and then the next game doing the same thing, or, you know, he's going to be at a for suspension.
Okay, we have some scores. Dave Hodge is listening downstairs. David, have you got a question for Gary?
Yes, Brian. It's interesting that we talk about what happens when these fights start, how certain players have to protect other players, and how there are two teams involved, and when it gets started, it's pretty tough to put the blame on one team or another, one player. But I really would like to ask Gary, as a former player who played this game hard, but I think is probably a little more disgusted with what he saw than what he wants to say, how do you stop it? I mean, there are going to be people who say don't rant on and rave on with each example of brawls and what we have to do to clean them out of hockey. But if the Players Association isn't prepared to make a stand, if the league owners or John Ziegler are not ready to do something about it, then we're going to see this thing again, and we'll see it many more times before these playoffs are over. And I'd just like to ask Gary, if he had the power to do something, how would he try to do it?
All right, Gary couldn't hear your question, David, but I could. And the question basically, Gary, is how do you stop something like this? Brawling, we're going to see more of it. What about the Players Association? If you had the authority to put a stop to it, would you, and how would you do it?
Well, first of all, the suspensions that they're giving out, what, 1, 2 games, that doesn't mean a thing. You know, when you start handing out suspensions of 10, 15 games, that's the only way you're going to stop it.
Well, if you hit them in the pocketbook, and I don't know what happens, but I assume the players don't pay a lot of their own fines, or when they're suspended, I assume there are ways and means of getting money back into their pocket. Maybe you could tell us about that. You were there.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks, Brian. Now, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. You know, when you're talking about big fines, I think players should pay for it. You know, but I can't agree with if a player is going to jump on the ice to protect one of his teammates, you know, I can't see the player paying for that fine. You know, he's part of a team. He's protecting his own player in a situation like that. I don't think he should ever have to pay for it. Now, when you start getting those misconducts for sassing at the officials, that's a different situation. Then I think you should be responsible for something like that.
All right. Now, you have a relationship with a lot of little kids around this country, and hockey players generally do. How do you think this affects young kids who play hockey, love the game, and want to play the game, and they see something like this? Do you feel that they emulate some of these players that go out there and start throwing punches more than the fellows that go out there and score the goals?
There's no question. Absolutely. They see it on TV, and they try to do the same thing in their leagues. But then it's up to the leagues that they're playing with. You know, no fighting, no body checking, or whatever it takes. You know, with the young kids, you have to develop the skills. You know, the skating, the passing, and the shooting. Develop those skills. But it seems like the parents and the coaches, they put so much pressure on these kids, you know, to win, which is a lot of bulk. You know, I just can't go for that. I like to get the kids, teach them the fundamentals. That's the most important part, I think.
So what you're saying basically then is do take the fighting out of the game so the kids won't have to watch it and emulate these players. And what you're saying goes against the grain of the old Philadelphia Flyers. That era hopefully is gone forever.
Brian, you're never going to take the fighting out of hockey. You know, a lot of times fans, believe it or not, you ask them, they're not happy unless they see a fight. But it's something that happens out there because of the body contact. Somebody gives me an elbow, I give it back. You look at a man right in the eyes and you drop the gloves and you throw a few punches. That's going to be with hockey, and I don't think it'll ever change. The only thing that I can say in that respect is get rid of the brawls. You know, if you have two men facing each other, they drop their sticks. I would rather see that than you know, the spearing and the high sticking and that sort of thing.
But I agree with you there.
With two men, you have let them fight, break them up if somebody gets hurt. I don't really think you'll ever eliminate that from our game.
Well, statistics prove that most injuries are done by the hockey stick, not the punches that are thrown. And if you talk to Darryl Sittler, for instance, he had a fight with a friend of his, Darryl Edistrom, not too long ago, and he said, we swung at each other. We kind of had to face off, and you don't want to back down in a situation like that, so you do get involved.
Right. I firmly believe that, and Brian, I never won a fight in my life in the National Hockey League, but when I was challenged, then I had to accept. You know, when somebody drops his glove, you look kind of a fool, you know, standing there and not do anything. All right, so you drop your gloves, and if it means taking a beating, you're going to take a beating.
I hear them just giving the announcements now of the penalties that took place, and we want to get Dave Hodge in here again, and we'll try to tabulate these penalties. Come on in, Dave, with another question.
I do want to say something about fines being levied against players. If Turnbull should not be responsible for a fine, and if Gary's thought is that maybe nobody out here should pay a fine, then how about slapping the teams with some pretty hefty fines? If Harold Ballard and the owners of the Atlanta Flames have to pay for this, then suddenly maybe they're not going to want to see it too often if it hits them in the pocketbook. And secondly, if hockey is always going to have fights, give me some more Challenge Cup games, because I don't think it is necessarily so. We saw 3 great hockey games, not one fight in New York a couple of months ago, and I think it's possible to see it again.
David made a good point about the Challenge Cup series, Gary. He says if we're always going to have fighting in the game, then give him and give all of us perhaps more action like we saw in the Challenge Cup, which did not result in brawling or fighting. And let's get back to this again about taking the brawling out of the game.
Well, there's no question. I agree with you. I agree with Dave that we really don't need it. This game is such a great game when you see the skating skills. Just look at a guy like Salming, how he moves on the ice, or a guy like Sittler. You know, the great beauty and the skating and the passing and the shooting. Again, you have it because of the body contact, you know, and I don't think that you'll ever get away from it. But I don't think that I don't think we've ever seen hockey like was played against the Russians in the, you know, during the All-Star break. In my way of thinking, it's the best hockey that we've ever seen, and there was no fighting involved.
Dave also mentioned that if you slap the owners with really heavy fines, that might deter some of it too. We're going to try to catch up to date now. Let's go back now to Dave Hyde.
England, who's been thrown out of the game, but we'll try to list the game misconducts. It's just that. But Darcy, Rota, Brad Marsh, Willi, Plett, David Shand out of the game for the Flames. The Leafs ejected are Dave Hutchison, Ian Turnbull, Darryl Sittler, and Tiger Williams. And we are told through all of the confusion that the Atlanta Flames will play shorthanded for 2 minutes after all is said and done. Everything else balances itself out, but the Flames are going to have a 2-minute minor penalty to kill. That might have been what the people were booing, but believe me, if they have this figured out already, then they ought to certify this place as the Einstein Institute and make everybody in here geniuses. I don't know how it works out to that, but Atlanta's going to be playing a man short for 2 minutes, and we have 9 hockey players, 5 Flames, and 4 Leafs out of the game. And are we ready to go? Let's send it back upstairs.
Okay, Dave, and teams are on the ice now for the third period. And as I have a look at a summary of that second period, which isn't over yet, really, because we have 51 seconds to play. McKechnie at 6:26, McKechnie at 9:14, and Pronovo at 16:37. Toronto outshot Atlanta 12-3 in the second period, outscoring them 2-1. After a scoreless first period, Atlanta outshot Toronto in the first 12-5.
People still stunned here with the game misconduct penalties. All these players out of the game with the game misconduct, including Sittler and Turnbull and Williams of the Leafs. And Houston was the first man off the bench for the Atlanta Flames. And Gary, there's really confusion up here where everybody's scrambling to get all those penalties sorted out, and not only the game misconducts, but the other penalties that went along with them.
It looks like Rota's out, Houston is out, and Shand is out.
And Willi Plett is out.
And Hutchison. There's one of the evicted Leafs, Tiger Williams, looking on. Gary, I didn't get a chance to catch up on the Leaf penalties now. Hutchison had 2 minors, a major, and a game. Turnbull had a major, a 10-minute misconduct, and a game misconduct. Sittler, a major, 10 minutes, and a game misconduct. Williams had a major and a game misconduct, and Burrows got 5 minutes.
Well, you look at the players that were ejected, and Sittler and Turnbull, that's certainly going to hurt them. You know, Sittler, great on the power play, a good face-off man. Turnbull, one of the steadier defensemen. You look at the Atlanta players that were ejected. At least they didn't get any of their high scores, you know, thrown out of the game.
Gone on and on. All the Leafs now. There are the evicted players. 4 of the Leafs, Hutchison, Turnbull, Sittler, and Williams out of the game. 5 Flames out. Rota, Houston, Marsh, Plett, and Shand.
They all got their sweatsuits out there. They can get it down the ice. There you see the Atlanta ejected players viewing the game.
They got dressed. I mentioned Cliff Fletcher talking about Darcy Rota and what a pleasant surprise he's been for Atlanta since coming from the Blackhawks. Of course, under Bobby Pulford, he was kind of forced into a checking style of hockey. And here's a guy who's really scored some goals for